speaker is Ellie Kinney, representing Youth and Student CND. Ellie came into politics through her involvement with CND. She founded the Goldsmiths University of London Student CND Society, and she's usually to be seen carrying a banner saying, "Books not bombs." Welcome, Ellie.
Thank you for having me, thanks for inviting me, and apologies to anyone who I've probably whacked with that banner several times. It is not very easy to carry. So yeah, with only 32% of 18 to 29-year-olds voting Conservative at the last election, I don't think you'll struggle to find young people opposed to renewing Trident, particularly considering the massive youth support for Jeremy Corbyn. It's hardly surprising to see that this government... Always get a clap when you mention Corbyn. It's hardly surprising seeing that this government seems to be making it as hard as possible for young people to access luxuries such as employment and education. It's no wonder that young people are baffled by the concept of spending £100 billion on weapons that have barely ever been useful or even relevant during our lifetimes. To put it into perspective, while maintenance grants and allowances that enable people from low-income backgrounds to afford college and university living costs are being scrapped by this government, the £100 billion spent on renewing Trident could pay tuition fees for nearly 4 million students. It could also be spent on bringing back EMA, enabling education to be accessed by people of all income backgrounds and walks of life. While education faces further and further vicious cuts, £100 billion could be used to build or refurbish 30,000 primary schools, creating thousands of new jobs and meaning that young people across the country can be educated in top quality facilities rather than the crumbling school buildings that can be found today. On top of cuts to education, Jeremy Hunt's crippling cuts to the NHS have left thousands of students, myself included, questioning if we can afford to study to become nurses, midwives or dentists without access to an NHS bursary. These bursaries are a lifeline for many NHS students who don't have the time to work alongside their studies and their long hours due to working unpaid in their roles, and desperately need this income to pay for food, bills and rent. Many students will be forced into considering a different, more affordable career path, leading to shortages of nurses and doctors and increased strain on the ones already in that profession. To put this government's priorities into perspective, on the evening after student nurses and midwives began fighting to keep their bursaries, airstrikes began in Syria, and a convoy carrying 8 Trident nuclear warheads drove through the UK. And yet we're still told that there's no money for NHS students. The final point I want to talk about may not seem to have that much relevance to the standard student arguments about scrapping Trident, like free education or student grants, but it's surely a key factor of why many are calling for Trident to be scrapped. Nuclear weapons are simply unsafe to have, and no child should have to grow up in a country that prioritises archaic weapons over the welfare of their children. During every major memorable threat in most young people's lifetimes, Trident was completely useless and remains completely useless against pretty much all modern threats, such as cyber warfare and terrorist attacks. And in a time of austerity, where public services face damaging cuts, £100 billion would be better spent on something that is at least somewhat useful. And I'm sure that since you're here, you probably don't need that much persuading of why we should be renewing Trident. Shouldn't be renewing Trident either. God. But it's important to realise the wide range of things that could be done and the huge amounts of people that could benefit from £100 billion being better spent. Education could be turned from a business charging ludicrous amounts to something that's actually accessible for all. Becoming a nurse or a midwife doesn't need to be a career for only those who can afford it. And the government spending money to please their friends in the war industry doesn't have to be something that we just talk about and complain about. We just need as many people to be marching through central London next Saturday, and I hope to see you all there.